My name is Kent Lucas, and I'm a Harvard-trained research analyst at Taipan Publishing Group. Each and every month, nearly 250,000 wealth builders rely on us to guide them through the troubled financial markets, and not just in the U.S., because we have readers in Australia, Canada, Europe, the Middle East, and other parts of the world. We have to keep up with global trends, too. What's more, at Taipan, we don't manage money, so our research must stand on its own. If it doesn't, if we don't provide real value to our readers, if we don't help them learn how to grow and protect their money, we are out of business. And so far, we've been able to provide that value to our readers for 22 years. That's why I thought long and hard before I recorded this video presentation for you. After all, I can't simply throw around disaster scenarios and dire predictions without solid facts to back them up. But after looking at all the information, I felt I had to come forward. Why? Because a frightening scenario is already beginning to play out in cities and countries around the world. And I'm not just talking about the value of the dollar, the yen, the euro, or even China's yuan. This rapidly approaching scenario is a top priority concern for these governments and every other government on the planet. In short, the looming crisis I'm contacting you about today is the crisis, the one that makes all doomsday scenarios come true. The government bailouts and central bank interventions, which have held the financial world together during the past 2 years, will be powerless. There'll be no playing nice with other countries. When this crisis hits, it will be about the raw act of survival. Gold, it won't be worthless, but it won't be as valuable as most people want to believe. Silver, same thing if this scenario plays out as I expect it could. Stocks, bonds, and other paper assets, only a select few will do you any good at all when the crisis hits and it all comes unraveled. You see, there's one thing people simply will not tolerate. Otherwise, civil people will revolt, rebel, rob, steal, and destroy to get access to this one vital resource. It's not oil, gas, gold, or silver. It's not even money. The one thing people will do absolutely anything for is food. That's why the crisis we are most concerned about is one that many think will never happen. What we're talking about is a major food crisis. Let's think about this. If you were a government official, the last thing you'd want is a nation full of hungry, restless people, right? The Spanish proverb explains the danger and how quickly a nation can turn on its leaders. Civilization and anarchy are only 7 meals apart. 7 meals is about 56 hours. 56 hours without food, and entire nations can go from civil to savage. Sure, there are some people born into hunger, so they never know the difference. However, for hundreds of countries around the world, food has never been an issue. Until now. Until now, we've pretty much taken food for granted, but that is changing fast. Maybe you've seen the news, like the lead paragraph in an article in the Sunday Times. The specter of food shortages is casting a shadow across the globe, causing riots in Africa, consumer protests in Europe, and panic in food importing countries. There was also this article in the Financial Times. Fears grow over global food supply. And what about this recent article from the New Zealand Herald? Riots spread as global food shortage worsens. I found dozens of other articles all leading to the same basic conclusion as that of Tim Lang, professor of food policy at the University of Leeds. He summed it up by saying, "We are sleepwalking into a crisis." The fact is, most people have no idea how close we are to anarchy. They don't realize how quickly a civilized society can spiral into chaos, and they certainly don't want to admit it. Despite all the press, despite all the food shortage riots going on right now, they just don't believe it will really happen to them. Many people believe food shortages only happen in third world countries, and that used to be the case. However, thanks to the growing global population and urbanization of the US, India, and China, the problem is getting much closer to home. Did you know stores typically only have an average of 72 hours of inventory on hand? Did you know very few families are capable of producing their own food, so even a temporary shortage of food supplies could be catastrophic? Let me ask you, how many meals would you allow yourself, or those you care about, to miss before you took matters into your own hands? I know we like to think we're civilized, but I have to wonder how many meals I'd be willing to miss before I started looking at options. My guess is not many more than 7. So far, most food shortages in the U.S. and other countries have been largely weather-related. Consider the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, for instance. You couldn't even get water, much less milk and bread. Then there was the tsunami in Indonesia, the earthquake in Haiti, the blizzard just before Thanksgiving in London that left store shelves empty. A recent Reuters article quoted analyst Chris Mann of Traders Group, Inc. in Chicago, who had this to say about how delicate the supply and demand balance is right now. Even if we have a good year, we are not going to have the inventories we've seen before. I really do think the time of cheap food prices is over. Everything is set to the point where supply equals demand right now. But if you pull one thing out of it, or if you disrupt the equation in some little way or tweak it, I think with inventories as tight as they are, it will really have an impact on prices. A drought, a flood, anything. But what if a food shortage was not event related? What if, instead, it was a true shortage, something that can't be fixed easily in just a few days? War, famine, pirates, labor strike, currency collapse? You can begin to get a sense of how quickly things could get out of hand. Or what if prices simply get so high, so fast, that a large portion of the country simply can't afford food? Take a look at this article that appeared in the Globe and Mail as I was putting together this presentation for you. Food prices hit a record level last month, according to United Nations statistics, and are forecast to grow by more than 30% this year. In a worst-case situation of critical shortages sketched by Citigroup Inc. analysts, prices could skyrocket by as much as 75%. It's easy to imagine how quickly the natives would become very restless, how quickly survival would do away with the rule of law. Let's face it, the governments can't afford to add millions of new people to the food stamps program. The truth is, they can't afford to pay for the 39.68 million, or 1 in 8, Americans already on food stamps. So based on the projected 30% to 75% increase in prices by the above article, those 39.68 million people on food stamps would get 30% to 75% less food than they are used to getting. Or, put another way, 1 month's worth of food would be cut to 1 week's worth of food. That's a 3-week shortage just from an increase in prices. Now, imagine a city like New York where large segments of a densely populated urban area are poor and using food stamps. Do you see how quickly we can have large portions of the population going without food for 2 to 3 days? Imagine millions of hungry, irritable people fighting over the same scraps of food, babies crying, looting, robbery, or worse. Keep in mind that people in many of these large urban areas don't have giant refrigerators and walk-in pantries to store food. They literally buy just enough food to get by. And they have absolutely no way of growing or providing for themselves. When things hit crisis mode, their only option will be stealing. Indeed, 7 meals from Anarchy may be just about right. As Indonesia's president said, the next economic war or conflict can be over the race for scarce food resources. I'm not telling you these stories to scare you. Instead, I'd like to show you how you can protect yourself from the coming crisis. First, you need to realize the food crisis is not new. It's simply accelerating. Chris Mayer, editor of Capital and Crisis, may have stated it best when he explained, "This food crisis has been in the works for a long time. It was there for all to see. The ratio of arable land to people has been falling for decades. Gains in crop yields have slowed. Population has expanded and income levels have grown. Diets have shifted. More people are eating more meat, which is much more grain intensive to produce. Please understand, this is not just a global problem, it's an American problem too." Let me take just a second to show you what's really going on in the quote above, because the facts are pointing to long-term problems. First, there's the arable land problem. The facts are shocking. According to the study Food, Land, Population, and the U.S. Economy, over the past 40 years, approximately 30% of the world's cropland has become unproductive. The author goes on to say, during the past 40 years, nearly 1/3 of the world's cropland has been abandoned because of soil erosion and degradation. So what is arable land? In short, it's land that is suitable for growing crops. Just take a look at this chart from the Global Education Project, showing how land around the globe is becoming degraded from things like street water runoff, construction, even wind and rain. Without good arable land, it's not just hard to grow food, it's nearly impossible. But that's only part of the problem, because the second problem is a decrease in crop yields around the world. A basic tenet of farming is crop rotation. However, with subsidies and demand for corn and other crops expanding, many farmers may be more concerned about the short-term payoff than they are about the long-term crop sustainability. As investors, we've seen how only keeping the next earnings date in mind with no regard for the long-term viability of a company can come back to bite you. I guess you might say the farmers on Main Street are catching on to the ways of Wall Street, and that can't end well. The third problem is our global population continues to rise. According to a United Nations report, each day 200,000 more people are added to the world food demand. The world's population has increased near fourfold in just the past 100 years. But that's just the beginning, because the global population is projected to increase from 6.7 billion to 9.2 billion by 2050, just 39 years from today. In other words, or if you are 50, then you'll be likely sharing this planet with an extra 3 billion people by your 89th birthday. That's like adding another 10 people for everyone you now see in America. It only took 12 years for the last billion to be added. That's a net increase of nearly 230,000 new people each day who will need housing, food, and other natural resources. Here's the thing. The largest population increase is projected to occur in Asia, particularly in China, India, and Southeast Asia, accounting for about 60% of the world's population by 2050. Now, this may be stating the obvious, but during that same time, good old planet Earth will not be adding any new land for growing crops. So where will the food come from? The truth is, no one knows for sure how we'll continue to feed these 200,000 new people who join us every single day. That's what makes this coming food crisis a near certainty. But there's still another factor. Diets are changing. According to an article on the Financial Times website, people in emerging markets with rising incomes want to eat higher quality food, notably chicken, pork, and beef. That in turn increases global demand for grain for animal feed. This is nothing new, because whenever a country becomes richer, the diet of its people improves. The people move away from rice and wheat into meat and other protein-rich foods. But the demand for wheat and rice doesn't go away. In fact, it can actually increase. Why? Because the wheat and rice is now used to raise beef, chicken, and pork. Fact is, emerging markets, as both food consumers and food producers, are transforming their own diets at an unprecedented pace. That means the way the world eats is going to be transformed too. Listen, here's what you need to understand about those 4 problems I mentioned earlier. Each of these problems was expected on some level. There are people and companies working very hard to find solutions. Governments are spending money to fix the issues. But what they are not expecting was the sudden demand this next catalyst is creating. A double dose of unintended consequences. With oil bouncing around the $100 per barrel price, the cost of moving food from one place to another is adding to the rising food costs. But it's not just transportation. Tractors also rely on fuel in every phase of growing food. First, the ground is plowed. Then a pass is made for fertilizer. Then the seed is planted. Then there's another pass for fertilizer. Then there's weed management. Then there's another pass for harvesting. And finally, 2 or 3 more passes are made for cleaning and prepping the ground for the next crops. Each pass over thousands of acres with 500 horsepower turbo diesel engines affects the bottom line. In short, the cost of fuel is a direct expense to the cost of producing food. But that's just one of the consequences. The other is going green. Biofuels are putting a strain on the amount of food that actually makes it to market. Thanks to the recent green agenda of many countries, farmers have switched to producing corn and other crops for fuel instead of for food. Here's a chart showing mandates through 2012. In other words, now that farmers can choose between biofuel and food as their crop, the bushel and the barrel are effectively bonded at the hip. And the trend doesn't look to be ending anytime soon, because the higher oil prices go, the more demand there is for alternative energy like biofuels. Check out this chart on how gasoline and biofuel prices are staying in lockstep. But that's not all, because there's another problem that is on everyone's mind right now. The problem that accelerates everything we've talked about so far. The wild card that could create the perfect food crisis storm, and it's like throwing gasoline on a fire, is inflation. So, On top of all these other factors going on right now, arable land, decreasing crop yields, growing population, changing diets in emerging markets, rising fuel costs, biofuel demand, we have to add inflation to the mix. And not just inflation, but what could turn into an inflationary war as countries around the globe try to inflate away their own debts. Inflation is to the food crisis what gasoline is to a fire, explosive and unpredictable. Of course, you'll never find anyone in the government actually admitting that their plan is to inflate away our debt, or at least try, but that's exactly what happens when governments get in debt trouble. As an informed individual, you already know inflation is what happens when too many dollars chase too few goods. So if you look at everything we've talked about today, and then you add in trillions of dollars, yens, euros, and every other currency on the planet to the one place where a very real supply and demand problem already exists, well, you get the perfect food storm. And it's already happening. Here's a chart of beef prices over the last 5 years. Up 123%. And a chart of corn prices, up 52% during 2010. Then there's the price of wheat, up 48% in 2010. And of course sugar, up 123% over the last 5 years. In fact, the entire category of food is going through the roof as indicated by this food price index chart, up 23% in 2010 alone. Hopefully by now you see how serious the situation is and how close we are to a real crisis, a food crisis showing up on your doorstep very soon. Of course, some people simply don't believe all this is actually going to happen, or that it won't actually be that big of a deal. I hope they are right. But what I can't shake is how this hope versus the facts reminds me of what is known in some circles as the outside context problem. What is the outside context problem? This is a new, unexpected event that is outside the context of a group of people's understanding. In other words, it's something they never even allowed themselves to consider because it has never been an issue. Right now, America is a country that is made up of several generations that have never really known food scarcity. Very few people in America have ever been truly hungry, and even those that have experienced hunger did so because of poverty, not because of a lack of food supplies. For the most part, the years of the Dust Bowl and Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath have been largely forgotten. So because a food shortage has never been experienced, it's outside of the context of possibility for us. However, just because something is outside our context does not mean it can't happen. It only means we are likely to be unprepared for it. An example would be the Native Americans. They were living here with no idea other nations existed around the world. Then one day they see ships approaching, but they had no concept of a ship, so there was no way to quantify the threat. Of course, we all know how that ended. So what do? Well, you do what you can, starting with the 3-part crisis plan every investor should consider now. Protect, preserve, then profit. There are basically 3 things you need to do in the face of any real crisis. 1 is to protect yourself and those you care about most. 2 is to figure out the best way to preserve the assets you have already accumulated. And the 3rd thing you need to do, and this should only be considered once you have taken action to both protect and preserve what you already have, that 3rd step is you should be ready to profit from the situation. Now, I know profiting from disaster or crisis may sound cold at first, but my job as a researcher and analyst at Taipan is to find ways to help you both protect and to grow your money. And in many cases, crisis leads to opportunity. However, it bears repeating, you must protect and preserve first. Then, and only then, should you look for ways to profit. So let's look at this 3-part crisis plan. As I said earlier, we first need to protect ourselves and those we care about most. Believe me, I know how this sounds, but this is a very real scenario you need to allow yourself to consider. Don't deny the facts right in front of you just because it has never happened here before. Let's face it, there's no need to have a big fat retirement account if you and your family can't find food. Fortunately, there are some pretty simple and straightforward ideas that can save you a lot of heartache and trouble when this food crisis hits. I'd like to share some of those ideas in a report we've put together here at Taipan. However, please understand, we are not survival experts. Our specialty is financial reporting, but we believe our research staff covered many of the most important things you need to know in this report. The title of the report is Crisis Protection 101, Protecting Yourself During the Coming Food Crisis. In just a moment, I'll show you how to get a free copy of this report. But first, let me show you the other two parts of the crisis plan. The next thing you need to do is preserve the assets you already have. The thought of US dollars becoming less valuable is certainly a major concern. After all, most of us in the US have income that is denominated in dollars. Our savings are in dollars, and most importantly, our retirement and investment funds are in dollars. If US dollars become worth less, not necessarily worthless, it means that our purchasing power will decline, and we will be able to buy less stuff with the same amount of dollars. But most people don't realize that there is a relatively easy solution. Instead of owning dollars or traditional blue chip US companies, which currently hold record amounts of US dollars on their balance sheets, you can instead choose to own stuff, the very same stuff that will become harder to purchase as the dollar becomes less valuable or should a major crisis break out. The process is easier than it sounds. My expectation is that at some point in the next several quarters, we will see a sharp decrease in the value of US dollars, and we at Taipan all agree we are already beginning to see the early stages of this move. That's why it's a good idea to own financial instruments that are tied to the price of hard assets, things that you can touch, feel, eat, or use. This will allow you to preserve the value of the assets you have worked so hard to attain. While there are many ways to gain this kind of exposure in your investment or retirement account, the easiest approach is to own hard asset stocks that are tied to particular commodities. A few well-selected hard asset stocks should offer you tremendous pressure against inflation and help your investment account maintain a healthy value regardless of what the US dollar does in the coming year or two, and regardless of how this crisis plays out. Holding an assortment of hard asset stocks is a great way to preserve the purchasing power of your long-term investment portfolio. I've prepared a special report on what I believe are the 4 top hard asset stocks for preserving your wealth as we move through the coming crisis. It's called Crisis Preservation, using the physical power of hard asset stocks to preserve what's yours. This report is also absolutely free. But as I mentioned, there will almost certainly be a chance for you to profit during this coming crisis scenario, so we need to look for areas to grow your money as this scenario unfolds. Whenever a crisis rears its ugly head, I assure you someone is going to make some money. It might as well be you. As you've seen, one of the biggest problems is the amount of farmland available. Fortunately for us as investors, technology can get more food out of every acre of arable land, and in some cases turn otherwise unusable land into arable land. Because land is useless if it doesn't produce food, and moving forward, it will be more and more necessary to produce more and more food from each acre of arable land. I think this headline from an article may say it better than I ever could. Arable land, the new gold rush. And if arable land is the new gold rush, then what you're about to discover is the latest in gold mining technology. Hulking, 500 horsepower, self-steering tractors, citrus-picking robots, satellite-based plant scanning, iPads in a cornfield. If you thought farming was just overalls and plaid shirts, then you might be surprised. One of the ways companies are combating the food crisis is through technology. Farming is searching for high-tech solutions that will spread throughout this $134 billion industry. And let's face it, wherever $134 billion is being thrown around, you can rest assured there are some serious opportunities for investors, because technology may be the only way left to save the planet from food shortages like those mentioned above. That's why I believe you should consider profiting with these 3 high-tech farming solutions. World-famous investor Jim Rogers seized the opportunity. Consider his quote from The Economist on the future growth and profitability of agriculture globally. 10 years from now, it may be farmers who will drive the Lamborghinis, and the stockbrokers will drive tractors or taxis at best. Even in this day of multi-billion-dollar bailouts and stimulus packages, $134 billion is still a lot of money to be spread around. Now, you could take the obvious route and buy a great tech company like Intel, which is developing the Atom processor that will drive many of the technologies behind the high-tech solutions. And if you did, you'd probably do pretty well. The thing is, I believe you could do better. I have uncovered 3 companies that are actively using technology to increase crop yields, low water usage, and create more arable land. That's why I've prepared a new report called 3 Ways to Profit from the $134 billion High-Tech Food Crisis Solution. In the new report, I explain why I believe these 3 companies are in perfect position to provide solutions to the coming food crisis using technology. It is my belief that technology may very well be the only way left to fix the problem. And if that is the case, then these companies and their investors could be rewarded. However, let me remind you, even if this technology stops the food crisis, all other factors of population growth, changing diets, biofuels, etc., will continue to allow for profits from this sector. So, even if I'm wrong about how bad the crisis gets, you will already be positioned for profit. Well, that's the 3-part food crisis plan. Protect, preserve, then profit. The next question is, how do you get started implementing this plan? That's where Taipan Publishing Group's 22 years of experience comes into play. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, each and every month we guide nearly 250,000 individuals through the markets. We've helped people make money and we've helped them protect their money. People like Betty B. of Peoria, Illinois, who recently told us,
I live on my Social Security, so wins like this are very significant to grow my little investment pot. A big thanks.
And Sally F. of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who said,
Thanks for the BBI play. We made $1,500 in practically no time. This trade alone paid for my subscriptions.
And then there's Sherry F. from San Antonio, Texas, who said, I followed your recommendation. I made $6,315 profit after commissions. As good as these letters and others like them make us feel, there's a real uneasiness in the office these days. You see, we sincerely believe that folks who do not take the time to prepare for this coming crisis could lose everything. That's why we've produced this video, and it's why we've prepared this 3-part crisis plan. However, this plan alone will only get you so far if you don't continue to monitor the situation very carefully. So, we'd like to give you the following 3 reports absolutely free when you give our Safe Haven Investor Research Service a try. The 3 reports you'll receive are Protect, Crisis Protection 101, Protecting Yourself During the Coming Food Crisis. You'll also receive Preserve, Crisis Preservation, using the physical power of hard asset stocks to preserve what's yours. And the 3rd report is Profit, 3 ways to profit from the $134 billion high-tech food crisis solution. As I said, you'll receive all 3 reports absolutely free when you go ahead and give Taipan's Safe Haven Investor a no-risk try. That's not all you'll receive. You'll also get quite a few perks from being a Safe Haven Investor subscriber at no extra charge. You'll receive free weekly updates. At no extra charge, I'll give you weekly updates on the market as I see it, delivered straight to your email inbox. Get breaking news, important cutting-edge info and commentary, updates on open positions from Safe Haven Investors model portfolio, and more. I'll also make sure you have free, password-protected access to our members-only website. This electronic portal grants you easy access to Safe Haven Investors' powerful opportunities, updates on our recommendations, special articles, and unlimited access to all the research this service has compiled over the past several years. Plus, you'll receive a free subscription to Taipan Daily. Make your inbox a virtual cash machine with all the financial news and ideas in Taipan Daily. Written by Taipan's own experts on global macroeconomic trends, domestic issues and industries, commodities, and foreign markets, Taipan Daily will prove to be a valuable resource for hard-to-find opportunities that slip past your broker. And I'll make sure you're in our database to receive the members-only Taipan Insider e-letter. Discover firsthand how the Taipan Publishing Group uncovers the potentially lucrative ideas we pass your way. Plus, Also learn what all of our editors believe are the most important economic issues impacting your wealth right now. I can't overstate the importance of protecting your nest egg, the assets you have already accumulated. It's just as important as creating wealth. With Safe Haven Investor in your corner, you'll learn about and receive ideas that not only are safe and wealth protecting, but also act as powerful wealth creating investment strategies on an ongoing and up-to-the-minute basis. And rest assured, we are constantly tracking this growing crisis, and we are continuously looking for opportunities for you to profit from the situation whenever possible. So how much is access to this type of up-to-the-minute crisis watch information? It's far less than you might imagine. Normally, access to Safe Haven Investor carries a list price of $129 per year. However, because we are truly concerned for investors, we want to bring as many people on board as possible. We know that millions of folks will never take the time to think about these things, but you have. And if we can't save them all, we'll certainly do our best to save those, like yourself, who want to save themselves. So to ensure you don't pass on access to this 3-part crisis plan, we are offering you a special rate of just $39 for an entire year's access to Safe Haven Investor and the Taipan family of researchers and editors. Or you can save even more and pay only $69 for 2 years. Plus, you'll never have to worry about subscription rate increases. For your convenience, we'll automatically bill your credit card just $69 every 2 years until you tell us to stop. Our hope is that you will find our crisis plan so valuable that you'll become a lifelong subscriber. I guess you could say the burden of proof is all on us. In fact, you'll have the next 3 months to decide if our research is working for you. If not, let us know and we'll give you a full refund, and you can keep the 3-part crisis plan as our gift to you for giving us a fair shot. Bottom line is, you get a free copy of the crisis plan, and you get 3 full months of research and insights from our team before you ever have to make any decision about whether or not to continue receiving our research. All you need to do to get started is simply click on the link below, which will take you to a secure order form. Once you process your order, you'll have your 3-part crisis plan within minutes. Oh, and before I forget, I'd like to also offer you one additional tool to fight this coming crisis. If the big trigger of inflation hits like we expect, it will most likely be because of the dollar's falling value. In fact, we could easily see the dollar lose its reserve currency status. That's why we created the special free bonus report, how to bank $540,000 worth of the new world reserve currency. Back in 1913, 7 men, who collectively represented 25% of the world's wealth, gathered on a 7-mile strip of land called Jekyll Island off the Georgia coast. Their purpose was a friendly duck hunting expedition between old friends. However, not a single duck was shot that weekend. Instead, this secret alliance changed the world's definition of money for the next century. You see, what came of that meeting was the creation of something you know as the American Federal Reserve, an institution that's been in power now for more than 95 years. Today, we believe a similar red herring is on the horizon. 5 men from around the globe will meet, much like the Jekyll Island 7, under the pretense of a routine get-together. When that meeting ends, the way you think about money will change forever. Thanks to a high-placed source, we have a pretty good idea what the outcome of this meeting is going to be. Those who understand the situation and take action stand to be rewarded. You could walk away with as much as $540,000, if not more. You can learn all the details of how this classified meeting could end up shaking the very foundation of our world's economy inside the special bonus report titled, How to Bank $540,000 Worth of the New World Reserve Currency. I'd like to send it to you at no charge once you become a subscriber to Safe Haven Investor. Just another layer of preservation and profit you can implement by allowing us to help you help yourself. So please don't hesitate. Click on the subscribe now link below to get started today.